Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in today on YouTube, and a big thank you to Courtney Strom for her help in arranging this. It's the fourth Sunday of Lent, and in the old days this was known as Laetare Sunday, a day of rejoicing. Hence today we have the rose, or let's call it for what is, pink vestments today. There are none so blind who refuse to see. Nowhere is that statement more evident than in today's gospel story that we find from St. John's Gospel from chapter 9, verse 1 to 41. It's a story that begins with a man who cannot see, and it finishes with the Pharisees who, while they are not blind, truly cannot see. Let's first consider the blind man. His cure is simple. Jesus makes some mud, applies it to his eyes, and tells the man to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. And he returns with sight. But not only can he sees things that others don't. Granted, at first he's completely ignorant about Jesus. But as the story continues, he has some brief but profound conversations, including one with Jesus. He intently listens to Jesus. Through his healing, he's also opened up to a process of conversion, so that by the end of the gospel, he's able to see Jesus for who Jesus truly is, the Christ, the Son of Man. Not only was that man now able to see, but most importantly, he's able to see with the eyes of faith. The parents of the blind man can see, but they have a problem. They don't want to admit that they can see. When questioned by the Pharisees, they admit that yes, the man is their son, and yes, he was born blind. But they are very evasive when asked how it happened. They simply say, "Ask him." And in giving such a reply, they are guilty of doing something that has been done over the centuries. They're hiding, claiming ignorance. They do so because they're scared. They're scared because they're afraid of what could happen if the truth is spoken. Their refusal to testify to the truth brings to mind the sad story of the countless murders that have taken place in the city of Toronto over the past 2 decades, often happening in very public places with many people present. But when the police arrive, everyone claims that they saw nothing. It's like all of them were temporarily blinded. And why? Just like the blind man's parents, they're afraid to get involved. And as a result of their fear, justice is impeded, and the cycle of violence and death goes on and on. But all who do so forget something important. God has very little time for those who lack the courage to speak out and act according to the truth. Their lack of courage recalls the words of God in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, when God says, "How I wish you were hot or cold. But because you are neither hot or cold, but only lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth." For God will spit out those who refuse to testify to the truth. The Pharisees in our story can also see, but they too have a problem. They see only what they want to see. And because the circumstances of the cure of that blind man does not fit their very defined notions as to who God is and when and how God can act, they completely miss out on the truth of the Messiah, who is standing there right in their midst. These men were so religious, so devout in their faith, yet they were blind to the reality of Jesus and wouldn't even bother to listen to him. How sad. You know, from our perspective 2,000 years later, it's very easy at first glance to look down at the parents of the blind man and the Pharisees. But you know, their story is also for us, because we need to ask ourselves, Are we ever like them? Consider the parents and ask yourself, just like them, have I ever been in a situation where I don't want to admit that I can see? For example, have I turned a blind eye to the misappropriation of funds at the place where I work? Was I ever blind to watching bullying happening in my high school or grade school while I stood off at the side, fearful of getting involved? No doubt you can add your own examples. Sadly, there are many. Refusing to testify to the truth. It's an essential ingredient for the spread of sin and evil. Now let's turn our attention to the Pharisees. Do we have anything in common with them? You know, the Pharisees were so rigid in their beliefs, they developed a big blind spot when it came to the presence of the Messiah in their midst. But let's be honest. It is also very easy for us to slide into the practice of seeing only what we want to see, whether it concerns ourselves, other people, our faith, our world. It brings to mind the stories that we've just been hearing about in the last few days, about the crowds of university students in Florida jamming and packing together on the beaches, or the nightclubs of Berlin literally being filled with people. Were they blind, and for that matter deaf, to the realities of what we're called to do in response to the spread of the coronavirus? But you know, let's not just focus on those examples. We have to ask ourselves, like the Pharisees, is there something that I've been doing or haven't been doing that I cover up with all kinds of excuses? Do I have such defined religious beliefs that I've become blind at times to the presence and actions of God in my life? Do I have certain habits, behaviors, or personality traits that I don't like being pointed out and criticized? You know, we humans can become so rigid, whether it be in our faith, our behaviors, our opinions. And that rigidity can make us blind to the truth that is staring us right in the face. My dear people, today's gospel is a classic example of how the actions and teachings of Jesus are so relevant in our daily lives. For you and I are like the blind man. We all need healing in at least one aspect of our lives. You and I are like the parents of the blind man. We need the courage to be able to see the truth and testify to it. You and I are like the Pharisees, seeing what we want to see rather than what we need to see. Particularly in this time of the COVID-19 crisis, you and I are like all of them, because all of us need Jesus. We all need Jesus. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.